everyone, our guest today needs very little introduction. Bret, thank you so much for being with us today. You have been having an exceptional career for the past 2 decades in the industry. You've been the CTO of Facebook, the co-CEO of Salesforce. You founded Google Maps. You are now the founder of Sierra. You're on the board of OpenAI as chairman. Thank you so much for being part of the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So I would like to start there, actually, by mirroring what happened in the past 2 decades. You've seen literally every wave of innovation. You've worked with the best leaders out there that are so different, according to you, from Larry to Sergey to Mark Benioff to Zuckerberg. I was wondering, in terms of lessons, what are some of the common lessons or patterns you've seen when it comes to building exceptional teams and outstanding products?
I think building teams and building products in some ways is very similar across these different companies and different technology shifts. The thing that I always am humbled by, though, is sometimes the shifts in the technology are bigger than any individual team or individual company. If you look at the biggest companies in the world, most of them were born in an era where there was a big technical shift. So if you look at Amazon and Google and Salesforce, they all were born because of the internet. They're very different companies. You know, commerce and search and enterprise CRM are very different. But the reason they were able to exist and the reason they were able to displace or, disintermediate or disrupt the previous generation was because the emergence of the internet was so significant that it changed consumer behaviors. It created the market for e-commerce. It created the market for search. It enabled Salesforce to displace Siebel Systems, which was the technology company that preceded it. So I always try to remind myself of that at Sierra because I'm really proud of the product we're making. I'm really proud of the team that we've built. But I think it's important to realize we're riding this wave, which is AI agents and large language models. And that is more significant than any company riding the wave. The wave is what's driving the potential energy in the ecosystem. And I think that is important because as you're building a product, it's important to not be myopic and think that you are solely defining your future. The externalities are actually as important as the companies themselves. And I find that very humbling, and I think it changes the way I think about team building and product building.
That's fascinating. And I know that also probably something core for you and for what you've built over the past 2 decades is around the values. And I know one very important value for you is customer centricity. I have heard from you that most of your customers have you for a number. I know that you brought Will Guidara, the author of Unreasonable Hospitality, this week actually to a conference in San Francisco that was talking about how, as a 3-star Michelin chef, he's bringing this unreasonable hospitality to the customers. The question I have for you on that is that it seems that's something you do extremely well, but how do you do that from moving from having 10 customers and delivering this amazing customer centricity to doing that with 1,000 customers?
It's the right question. I think it's so important because if you just zoom out a moment, what you're doing at your company, what I'm doing at Sierra, I think companies don't just want a technology platform. They want a trusted advisor who is going to help them navigate what has to be the most tumultuous period in technology in either of our lifetimes. And technology is, I don't want to say it's cheap, but it's more of a commodity than finding a partner that will help you navigate to where your company needs to go 5 years from now. And, whether that's, back office or front office, I think that's a huge part of the value that we provide. And you brought up Will Guidara. So when he ran 11 Madison Park and they discovered this idea of creating the moments of delight, a lot of Will's philosophy was, how do you operationalize that? How do you go from it being heroic and an accident to making it repeatable so that everyone, in the front of house, as they call it in a restaurant, can participate in that? And if you read his book, which I recommend everyone does, it was actually creating even job functions around that. They'd have someone on the floor of the restaurant whose job it was to take the ideas of the people serving and manifest them. So, and some really bold, funny stories in that environment. So we think a lot about that, which is saying, we want to have an exceptional client experience. We want every company that works with Sierra to love our product, but also think of us as the most trusted advisor they have in AI. And it's a question of saying, how do you go from being heroic to being repeatable? And so our whole philosophy, and it sounds funny, is we are creating a machine to create happy customers. And we talk about building the machine. And what that means is if something goes wrong, let's say a customer has a bad experience. Let's say I get feedback that in one quarterly business review, we didn't show up in the right way. We don't just go in and chastise the person who ran that. We say, what were the inputs that produced the wrong output? And how can we ensure not that we just fix this one instance, but fix the machine itself? So I think that's a really interesting mentality when you're building a company, is to think about it as building a machine and never just fix the symptom, but fix the root cause. For those of you who are engineers, there's this idea when there's an outage, you do a root cause analysis, and it's always blame-free. You don't blame the person, you try to fix the system, because the whole idea of engineering is it shouldn't require heroics to keep your service up. The system should actually make that easy. We think the same thing in our go-to-market teams, in our operations teams, and we really think of ourselves as building a machine.
That's incredible, and I guess that's also what you are doing with customer experience at Sierra in general with your technology. So I think that leads me to my next question about Sierra and how you are bringing agents to enterprise to really help them with everything customer facing. How do you think this is going to reshape the future of customer experience?
Well, I'm excited for this new world that we're going into from a customer experience perspective. I was trying to remember the world of customer experience before the internet, and just having to think about having to drive everywhere in person or call people on the phone to do all the things I can do by just pulling up my phone, tapping a few clicks right now. It's hard to imagine. And I think we're probably of the generation that I don't want to talk to anyone on the phone. If I can do it, on my phone, I'll do it 9 times out of 10. Agents are taking that to the next level. First, phone is probably the last remaining analog channel. And now it's digital because AI agents can pick up the phone. So you can have one team developing one agent that sends a WhatsApp, that exists on your website, that answers the phone, all on one team. So I think for the first time, companies can build a consistent customer experience across all of those channels. And that experience can be amazing. It's multilingual, it has perfect access to information, it's empathetic. It can understand not just rules and policies, but even understand things like, this person's upset. I'm going to go above and beyond for this person, something that you and I might do, but you don't really associate with software. But the other thing that's most exciting about it is if you are a consumer brand, the cost of answering the phone is usually on the order of 20 to 25 euros, just because of the cost of the person answering the phone. Most consumer brands' average revenue per user or per customer is less than that. So they literally can't afford to have that phone call. And as a consequence, it's almost impossible to talk to most companies. You probably have talked to your bank or maybe your mobile phone provider, but I joke it would be easier for me to call Sundar than it would be to call Google customer support. I don't even know it's possible, honestly. I think that's changed with agents because I think people think of this as a cost reduction tool, and certainly it is for some companies. But I think most people don't think about it. If you reduce the cost of something by 2 orders of magnitude, it will actually change what you can do with these brands. And so I think just like the early websites were kind of almost skeuomorphic versions of the physical world, and early mobile apps were very literal interpretations of the hardware on the phone. And it took a couple of generations to get to the WhatsApps and Ubers and Deliveroos of the world. I think we're in the early days of agents. But I think if you fast forward 4 or 5 years, every consumer will have almost a personalized concierge for every brand that they care about and work with. The clothing brand that you love, you'll show up, it will know the last 5 or 6 things you purchased and say, hey, do you know we have a new line coming out? It would go great with the shoes you bought last season. If you think about your mobile phone plan, I've got teenage kids who are growing up to the age where we're actually getting them phones for the first time. They'll help me onto the family plan. They'll know that I'm about to go travel. They can help me eliminate roaming fees by getting me on the international plan proactively. These are all things I think will start to become commonplace. And so I think it's delightful, especially as a consumer. I think we're entering this new era, just like sort of the 1997 era where we're just in the early innings. And I'm so excited where we'll be 10 years from now.
That's incredibly exciting indeed. And I guess to get there, one of the big questions is trust. And I think that's something you've done exceptionally well at Sierra. You already gained trust from the largest companies in the world. I was wondering, how do you design for that? How do you design for accountability? How do you design for safety, for trust, in a world where obviously agents are now completely going to act on your behalf?
This is one of the hardest questions in AI. As an engineer, when I first started developing on top of large language models, I had a hard time wrapping my mind around it because computers prior to large language models I thought of as really fast rule-following engines. If this, then that. And it would do that if this, then that really, really fast. And even if you think about a retailer going into Black Friday, they think of how many nines of reliability can my service have. Enter the world of large language models. They're relatively slow. They're fairly expensive relative to, say, a page view or a database transaction. And they're non-deterministic. You can give the same input 2 different times and get 2 different outputs. It's really different from just a software engineering standpoint. And going back to your question about trust, so what do you do with this technology that is at once super intelligent and then also kind of stupid at the same time? Almost everyone has had ChatGPT hallucinate, even something mundane. You're like, why did it say that? And you correct it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. You're right. I totally made that up. And I think that's really interesting. We have these technologies that are probably going to find a breakthrough in mathematics over the next couple of years, yet are also prone to even simplistic errors. So a couple things when I think about trust. First is don't overpromise. When an AI agent's in the wild, I think it should identify. I'm an AI agent. I sometimes make mistakes. And I think people understand that. I think consumers, thanks to having used ChatGPT, understand some of these idiosyncrasies. Number 2 is put guardrails around it. I don't think just having a model make decisions right now is necessarily responsible. But you can put guardrails around it. I went bowling with my kids the other day. You can put these little blow-up bumpers in the gutter so your bowling ball won't fall in the gutter. I just think of the scaffolding you can put around AI in the same way. Don't assume it's perfect. Put checks and balances in there. Have supervisor AI models watch the underlying AI model. Mix deterministic and AI-based guardrails around it. And then number 3 is use your people to audit it. AI is imperfect, but people are more imperfect. So if you think AI agents make mistakes, you're right. But if you actually quantify the number of mistakes your employees make, which no one does, it's much greater. But you usually have controls in place. Most people have, if you're a public company, you have an auditor who will look at all your contracts and say, does this meet our revenue recognition rules? You do that not assuming perfection. In fact, you assume the opposite of perfection. I think we should do the same thing with AI. Put in controls so that people are auditing it and consistently improving it. The advice I always give companies around trust is stop waiting for AI to be perfect. It's not. In fact, assume it is imperfect and ask a different question, which is, how do your customers know that it's imperfect so that you don't lose trust? How do you know when mistakes happen so you can fix them and build that sort of controls and audit loop so you can be responsible in how you deploy the models?
I cannot agree more with everything you just said. The follow-up question on that, I think, is around, I would say, what is also necessary on top of that, I would say, for agents to really make, I would say, the next leap. We are still at the very beginning, I would say, of the agentic revolution. And we are obviously still lacking memory for agents. Obviously, we are going to try to bring RL to the world of LLM as well. So just wondering also in that world, if you think 3 to 5 years down the line, what will need to be true for agents to really have taken that revolutionary leap?
It will really differ across use cases and industries. I think we are at a point where some agents work really well right now. Probably the areas that I think are the most mature are customer service, the domain of Sierra, and software engineering. Yeah. And both are not perfect, but they're very good for some use cases. Here at Sierra, most of our front-end engineers and designers use vibe coding to make mockups. And it's great. It's so much better than just looking at a static mockup. You can actually click around. You can get a sense of the interaction model. So we sort of crossed the point for creating a prototype. Agents are great. Similarly, most software engineers I know will use AI agents for code review. It's a great case for AI agents. It's, I think, shovel-ready now, and I think, I don't want to typecast engineers, but I think they spend less time on code reviews than they do writing code, and I think it's a net benefit to the quality of software today. Are we to the point now where you, as a CEO of a company, could make an AI agent write your entire software stack? No, and I don't think we're going to get there anytime soon. And so I think, in the short term, it's, be realistic about what is appropriate for the models to do now. So what is required for that future? First is, I think that really thinking about sort of the development model of agents. I think we're still in the early innings. If you go back to the early days of the internet, I was doing research for Sierra Summit, our conference that we had last week, and there was this article from 1997 in Wired magazine talking about banks spending about $23 million on their website just to add a login form.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so now someone would go to something like Vercel or Next and do that in an afternoon, but that cost $23 million. In fact, the whole article was about most of the projects failing too. So it was $23 million and it didn't even work. In the late 90s, there became a pattern for developing websites called the LAMP stack. Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, I think is what it stood for. And the importance of that wasn't those technologies, but it was just that there was a pattern. So if you graduated from university and you got a new job and someone said, make a website, you would default to these patterns that other people discovered. You didn't have to decide from first principles how you actually scale a website. You just knew you used the LAMP stack. Then you fast forward a few years and then you have tools like React. You have the public cloud, and now you have tools like Next and Vercel. And now you can make extremely sophisticated websites, go all the way up to things like Shopify. If you want to start a storefront, you're not writing a lick of code, right? You're just clicking buttons. I think to actually get to that next generation of agents, we not only need to make progress at the model layer, we need the design patterns and tooling to mature as well. For the conference, after discovering that article from 1997, I was trying to find examples of modern web development. And I don't know how true this is, but when Kylie Jenner launched her cosmetics line, apparently she only had 7 people on staff. And it was like a $1-point-something billion cosmetics business. And so I sort of say, like, that's my litmus test, is we have banks spending $23 million to add a submit button. And then you have Kylie Jenner with a staff of 6 launching a multi-billion-dollar cosmetics line. I'm like, there's a lot of product work, not just technology work. And I actually think that's there that companies like Sierra are focused on. But I think that's actually what's required, because you can't have a PhD in computer science be a prerequisite for making an agent if you really want agents to actually change society. And I think that's a lot of product design work over the next 10 years.
And I think probably to elaborate on that, if product design is really one of the big things that needs to happen, I know that you're incredibly excited about the idea of verticalized business application and AI application versus probably more of a generalist agent, and that's obviously what you do at Sierra, that's what we do at Pigment. I would love you maybe to elaborate a bit on that, on how do you see the future of enterprise technology being shaped towards that?
I think it's a great question. I think it's an exciting time in enterprise software because I do think it will change. I think the atomic unit of the web was the website. The atomic unit of mobile was the mobile app. The atomic unit of AI is the agent. And I think most agents will do a specific job really well. It will answer the phone, it will qualify a lead, it will make a sale, it will audit your financials, it will review a contract of a supplier. And the reason I think that is, I think just like you would hire an employee who's a specialist to do those jobs, I think if you're making a piece of software to do that job, I think it really helps to have a company who's specializing in that domain. The reason why software as a service exists in the face of Amazon Web Services and Azure is you want to amortize the cost of all of the work to develop that software across multiple clients. Every company in the world shouldn't have to spend their time and effort to, for example, for an ERP system, make a new accounting standard when it comes out. That's just silly. It's just silly economically. And I think the same will be true as agents. But the interesting thing about agents is they're really tied to a workflow as opposed to just a database, which I think has sort of been the anchor tenet of most software as a service. And that workflow could span multiple systems of record. Sometimes they're required to. And as a consequence, I really think it requires domain expertise. If you're a consumer packaged goods company and you have a complex supply chain and you have an agent that will help you, for example, optimize your supply chain for the upcoming holiday season, it really requires knowing how a CPG company works, how supply chains work, how contracts work, how shipping containers work. I don't think you can make like an abstract agent building tool and actually solve that problem. Similarly, if you think about a public company and their quarter ends and all the work that their auditor does to audit their financials before they report earnings, that's a pretty technical, and I don't mean technical in the computer science sense, I mean technical in like the accounting and financial sense. So as a consequence, I think there will be companies in each of these areas. One of my favorite examples is a company called Harvey, which is a legal technology company. I don't completely understand all the nuances of the product, but I think one of their products is an agent that does an antitrust review. So if you're about to do a big acquisition, it will tell you which countries have standing to review the acquisition, what's the relevant case law, things like that. I'm probably screwing it up. That's something that wasn't even software before. In fact, I was talking to a venture capitalist and I joked, like, had you ever invested in legal tech before AI? And they joked and said, no. I can't think of one large public company that's like legal tech. And now one of the most interesting companies in AI agents is doing legal agents. And the reason for that is the workflows that lawyers did are actually quite valuable, and agents doing them are quite valuable. So not only is it changing the way I think software is delivered in the form of agents, it's opening up new software markets as well. I joke I want to just host a meetup between people understand these obscure back office processes and all the AI engineers here in San Francisco, because I think that's where all the value is, but not enough entrepreneurs are working in it. And I think that's where a lot of the value is going to unlock in enterprise software.
I love that. I think that's also what we see with our customers, is that now we are enabling the impossible with a lot of use cases. It's just things that were just not possible.
That's right.
Not possible. So now, we've talked about these workflows, and on that same thread, what do you think are some of the most underexplored AI architecture that will create a big breakthrough in the next decade? I read that you don't want to think too much 10 years down the line because it's a bit sci-fi, but I wonder still, like, what do you think can happen, and what excites you, I would say, in terms of the next opportunities?
Well, first, I think it's exciting that artificial intelligence over the past 3.5 years has really moved from the domain of machine learning to engineering. And what I mean by that is a lot of, I'll say, full stack engineers can use AI models off the shelf without domain expertise in reinforcement learning and actually get a ton of value from it. I view it like the world of databases. You don't really need to be a database expert to use a database in your application anymore, but it took a lot of work to get to that point. And I think that's a really positive thing, because I think the more you had to have a machine learning team and a data labeling team and understand, RL or supervised machine learning to get any value from AI, it really limited the applications. So broadly, independent of AI architectures, I'm just excited that AI is now a mainstream building block that almost any engineer can use in their applications. And I think we'll start to see more interesting, more long-tail applications of AI that we would not have seen before. But broadly speaking, I would say that one of the challenges I see in applied AI is that if you take machine learning and reinforcement learning, they can be somewhat opaque. If you give an objective function to sort of an RL, a reward function to an RL process, you'll have something that actually works really well, but you don't necessarily understand why or have fine-grained control over it. And for some business processes, that might not be acceptable. So for example, if you have a retail agent and you're saying, let's optimize for customer satisfaction, and it changes your return policy, that might not be acceptable, right? It might have improved your CSAT, but there's guardrails around it. So I think one of the interesting product exploration areas is how to take the really interesting best practices from sort of AGI and reinforcement learning and training, but bring it into the domain of product where humans can sort of be in the loop of controlling how that AI works. And I think we just have a lot of design work left to do there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I will finish, if you don't mind, by quick-fire questions. And I will start with one that I think is critical, is what is one philosophical question about AI that keeps you up at night?
I think there's a number of interesting safety issues that are talked about a lot with AI. Certainly just alignment and ensuring that the AI is aligned with the people who create the models, the people operating it. There's also a lot of discussions about geopolitical and national security risks. One that I think a lot about is mental health. I think that if you read books like The Anxious Generation and the impact that things like smartphones and social media have had on teenagers, and in general, if you just look at the statistics, we're less social than we were a decade ago. And it may not be the fault of this technology, but technology is certainly amplifying those behaviors. I think AI has the potential to really help mental health. I think it will democratize access to therapy, which I think is incredibly exciting. It also could isolate some people. And so that's something that keeps me up a lot at night, is just how can you maximize the benefits of AI in mental health while minimizing the downside? And I think as we've seen with social media and the smartphone, it's complicated. I don't think it'll be easy to do so, and it definitely keeps me up at night.
Do you have some advice for parents on that?
I think of things like ChatGPT more like Google than social media, meaning I think of it as a tool. So we try to teach our kids how to use it responsibly. They're not allowed on social media, but they are allowed to use ChatGPT. I've taken the approach of trying to have it amplify their agency, but not have them use it as a crutch. I think it would be, like as I talk to my kids, it's completely inappropriate for them to use it to write an essay. But it might be inappropriate for them not to use it to critique their essay, because why not use this wonderful tool to help them become a better writer? So we've been trying to teach them how to use it in a way that doesn't get in the way of their learning, but also teach them how to use it. And I really do think it's a really important tool, and it's hard to imagine growing up in the era of AI and not having things like ChatGPT be a tool that you use all the time.
Love that advice. What is the one product you wish you had built?
I would probably say the Cursor Codex Claude Code. It's changed the way that I develop software, and I just can't imagine working without it. So as someone who self-identifies as a software engineer, I'm just enamored with the coding agents.
It's a total game changer. If you weren't building companies now, what would you be doing?
Open source software. Can't help myself. I do it for free, might as well get paid.
Yeah. What's a book or thinker that most influenced how you build products?
That's a great question. I don't have a great answer to that question. I'm sorry. That's a great question. Yeah.
What's one rule of technology you think will be obsolete by 2030?
I think the concept of user interfaces will change dramatically because of the existence of personal agents. So today, we spend a lot of time on user interface design, and we as customers or users of the software have to learn the user interface. In a world of personal agents, will user interfaces learn you? And will you sort of delegate the interaction of most technology to your personal agent? And as a consequence, will the concept of user interface design be completely obsolete? That's my hypothesis.
And do you have advice for designers to think about that? Or
I think that it's hard to predict the future personal agents will bring you, but I think it will really bring the idea of customer experience down to first principles. What job do your customers hire you to do, as opposed to deciding like the size of a button or the font size or the image hero shot at the top of your homepage. And I think that will be a really different way of thinking about delivering a product. And design will still exist, but in a different form that's really broken down into sort of the essence of the value you provide your customers.
Thank you. And so the last one. So I think in order to be at the right page in terms of AI, we need to learn every day. Every day there is something new happening. And so we need to constantly learn. So I was wondering, for leaders in the audience, how can they keep learning amidst the constant wave of AI breakthrough?
Two things, which is I think find smart people and listen to them. Even as someone who's relatively in the center of this AI wave, I constantly recalibrate my own opinions based on deeply listening to people I respect. I listened to a podcast recently of Dwarkesh interviewing an economist named Tyler Cohen, and it changed some of my perspective on how quickly AI would be adopted. And I think it's important to always check your assumptions and have, people say strong opinions weakly held, and be intellectually honest about it. The other thing I would say for those of people listening who are product designers or engineers is to always tinker with the technology. I think it's very easy to pattern match with AI and extrapolate incorrectly or exaggerate the current potential, or the opposite, which is presume something's harder than it is. And I think it's very hard to understand the contours of a new technology without having your hands on it a little bit. And I think it's very easy and accessible to use this technology a lot. So if you're not using ChatGPT before every meeting, if you're not vibe coding prototypes in your spare time, if you're not using these tools, I think it's a mistake. Even if it's not the core of what you do, it will really give you, I think, better intuition about the direction of your business. And I think intuition is very important right now.
Thank you so much. That was such a fascinating interview. Really appreciate all the precious insights you shared. Thank you so much again for being part of the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.